cut rates today? Well, we're going to find out. Look, we also have the VA quietly killing a foreclosure protection program that helped out over 20,000 VA loan eligible people. We also have Warren Buffett finally announcing that by the end of this year, he should transfer out of the CEO position and he's the greatest investor of all time. You're not going to believe his ROI percentage, right? You would think maybe he would make an ROI of 50%, 100% over his career. No, it's going to blow your mind. What else do we got today? Man, we have Japan calling US tariffs extortion. Okay, that's a big deal. Japan is an ally of ours and they hold a lot of something that we're going to talk about later that's incredibly important. So it's very intriguing that they say US tariffs are extortion, but what do you think? So let's keep moving. Look, this week has been wild, but if you care about protecting your wallet, your investments, whether that's real estate, business, stocks, finance, you need to be watching this show every single week. All right, y'all. Look, if you don't know already, this is Military Wealth Club and welcome. All right, we welcome you here. I'm Mercedes, the Military Realtor. And look, as a service member homeowner that has worked in your boots before, right? Worked and walked, all of them, right? Twerked, worked, all of them. Look, we understand what it's like to serve and also be a homeowner or on that path, right? I remember being an E4, E5 on that path to homeownership and not knowing how to get there. Wanting to invest in my TSP and my BRS accounts in a Roth IRA, wanting to invest my money somewhere and not having any guidance, right? So that's why I'm here. All right, let's keep it moving. Look, I'm not going to waste any of your time today. We only have the top topics, right? The hot topics that we need to talk about this past week. And we bring all this information in a concise episode for you to understand. You don't have all this time to keep up with all this stuff that's going on every single day, but you need to stay on top of your investments. And these topics affect your investments all the way from the top to the bottom, right? People don't understand that economics, macroeconomics, whether it's on the global level or on the high national level, it affects everything down to small real estate economics to the person that just has a 4 unit. All right, so let's jump right into it. Look, number one, I mentioned that there was a VA program, right, that just got canceled. It just got canceled. Why would they cancel this VA program that saved over 20,000 VA eligible folks from foreclosure? Okay, look, this was the VA Servicing Purchase Program, and it officially just ended at the beginning of this month, okay? And this left nearly 90,000 seriously delinquent VA loans vulnerable to foreclosure. So we have seen an uptick in defaults, right? Consumer debt, foreclosures, okay? We have to be honest with what's going on in the economy, and this isn't a good time for this, right? We have Doge coming in doing what they're doing, but do you think that this is a good program for them to cut? Really, out of all the programs, right? They said that they were going to save what, $2 trillion, and they've saved maybe a little under 150 billion, right? Do we think that this VA program, the VASP program, is a program that they needed to cut for foreclosure protection? And this is for active, right? This is for people that are actively living in their homes that could possibly need foreclosure protection, right? These are veterans that need foreclosure protection. At-risk veterans who know if they're just on fixed income, right? Whether that's their retirement, their disability, social security, whatever it is. But do you think that this program is one of the programs that they should have cut? The VASP, the VA Servicing Program, that serves to protect military veterans and those with these VA loans from foreclosure. This provides an extra layer of protection. Do we really think this should be canceled? That's rough. That's rough. We got to be honest, guys. We got to be honest with ourselves. Look, Number two today. Look, I told you guys about the Federal Reserve meeting. I've been telling y'all. I'll let you guys know when the next one is. And this one on May 7th just came and gone. And they spoke, and what they said was no cut. So there is going to be no cut. And look, I mentioned that there was a 5% cut the moment of the meeting. So there was excuse me, there was a probability of a cut. 5% probability for there to be a cut down of 25 basis points from the range right now that it's at 425 to 450 to 400 to 425. Okay, but there was a 5% probability that there was going to be a cut, and there wasn't one. Okay, if I were a gambling man, I would have bet on that, but I'm not. I'm not a speculative person. I just go off of the data, okay, and some other things as well. But 5%, there was no other sentiment. Now I did consider, what if there was a cut? What if there was? What would that do, right? Now you have to remember, we got cuts at the end of last year, but they didn't move mortgage rates that much because the market already preemptively preloaded for this, for that cut previously. So right now, with only a 5% probability, not many people thinking that there was going to be a cut. If there was a cut coming out of left field, I think the market would have got a uptick going into summer, and we may still get one at the next meeting. Okay, we still may get one at the next meeting. And look, we're gonna take a look here. What information do we have here? What information do we have here? Because the next meeting is in 41 days. Okay, June 11th is the next meeting for the Federal Reserve. Right now, there's a 20% chance that there's going to be a rate cut on the June 18th meeting. Okay, that is big news because that is a large percentage that we haven't seen in a while. Okay, comparatively, right? Today we saw 5%. Before that, it was still single digits. It was like 3%. But right now, for this June meeting, right now it's 20%. There's a 20% probability. Now, a day ago, it was 30% probability, and a week ago, it was 63% probability. Okay, so this meeting here has a negative push on the market downward because look, from a week ago, we've gone a third of the probability percentage of a possible 25 basis point rate cut at the next June 18th meeting for the Federal Reserve, okay? So those aren't good probabilities now. These are just probabilities. That doesn't mean that something can't happen out of left field, but right, I'll show you guys. I'll show you guys the chart. I love showing you guys all the time how to, come on. Here we go. All right, how do I do this? Boom, boom. Okay, also share tab. All right, sure. All right, so meeting date right here, June 18th, right? Over here, this says 20% probability for 400 basis points to 425. It's a range, okay? It's a range, which kind of equates to 4% and 4.25%. Not exactly, but a estimate. Okay, over here we have 425 to 450, which is what we're currently at, and that's 80% that is going to stay at that level. Okay, and this is what I mentioned. See, it's over here the same thing, and a day ago it was 10% higher that there was going to be a cut, and then a week ago 63%. Okay, 63%. Okay, so now it's a third of that. Now this will change over time all the way up to the meeting. The important thing is all the way up to the meeting. That's why I even check this right as the meeting is going on to see if this is changing, right? And that's all I'll say on that. All right. Let me get out of this screen share real quick. All right, y'all. All right. So that's about the Federal Reserve. Okay, and let's see here. Let's see here. Now, if there was, you know what? I'm not even gonna comment on that. Look. Powell is on the wait and see rhetoric, right, for a while, and also the data rhetoric. He loves just waiting and seeing, and also the data. I like that he's being patient with the market and not being reactionary and putting us into a whipsaw, right? Which there has been a push from Trump, a lot of pressure because Trump's got his buddies, corporations, blah blah blah. They want cheaper rates, right? That's what he wants, and Trump wants to push him to do that, and then Trump take a little bit of the what pushed him to do that, which he would as a president, but Powell cannot take direction like that. All right, so Powell has the wait and see rhetoric, like I mentioned, okay, and no cutting until economy weakens or inflation drops. All right, I think there may be an increase in unemployment. Okay, and that may be what may push us to the next rate cut. Okay, I'll say that. I'll say that. Now, why does all of this matter? Look, mortgage rates may they're not. I don't like to say that they're staying high because statistically, right, historically, excuse me, they're not high. Okay, at median 6%. Okay, but cuts could boost affordability, of course. If there's a cut and it does move interest rates downwards even more, below 6%, right, 5.5, some, right, we're talking about most of the rates, 30-year conventional rate, pushing that down. And later in this episode, we're also going to cover today's current rates from VA and 30-year conventional, so don't miss that. But look, the housing market, some people would say it's in a little bit of a limbo. No, no, I really don't believe that. It's hyper local. One, it's cyclical. Two, it's hyper local. And three, there's black swans and random events, of course. But look, you have to look at your area, look at your zip code to see what's really going on with the metrics there, right? What are the days on market there? What's the percentage of the list to sale price ratio, right? What are people actually getting for their properties in that zip code? Because not every zip code may be in a recessionary period or may feel the recession when it does arrive in stronger force. All right. Now, the Fed does have a mandate, so they have a job to do, of course, right? They want max employment, right? Unemployment 4.2%. I'm telling you, I feel like the numbers are being misreported, which a lot of these numbers they get adjusted later in reports. You have to think about it. They have to compile all this data, get it, like clean it, organize it, do all this stuff, and then prepare it and then put it out. So sometimes, right, it's months that just the initial report comes out, and then they do an adjustment, right? They later go back, hey, well, we're gonna audit it. We have to adjust these numbers a little bit, and then they're completely off. But by then, months later, the human psyche already passed, right? Old reports, we don't care about that. That already passed. That was 6 months ago, 9 months ago. We don't care anymore. All right. So something to think about. They say unemployment is 4.2, 4.3, 4.4. I don't know. I feel like I'm pushing it a little bit higher. I don't know. Right? They wouldn't actually put the truth out there. Think about it. If there was something to panic or to worry about, right? Or I wouldn't even say panic or worry about, but if there was something going on in the market and it would cause a big market move, like everyone taking their money out of the banks at once, they wouldn't put it out there. Think right? They wouldn't. So with that thinking, I always if it's negative, I always push it up. If it's positive, I always pull it down, right? Because the media and the people that put out these figures, whether they're government, corporations, it doesn't matter. There's an incentive for them. They have a role to play. And we got to look between all these numbers and this data and really see what's going on with all of this together. Okay, so let's keep going. Okay, the big word is inflation, and we're still fighting stable inflation, right? Looking at core PCE at 2.6%. The Fed goal is 2% inflation. What does that really mean? 2% inflation means the dollar's inflating at 2%. You're losing 2% annually, target wise, right? Why is my money losing 2%? Because it's fiat currency and they just keep printing money. Okay, that's another conversation. Let's keep it going. Okay, I'm tired about talking about the Fed right now, but look, cuts are still priced in for later this year, right? We're pricing 2 to 4 cuts. We will see. It depends on inflation, it depends on unemployment, depends on how these tariffs go with the trade war, right? How is this summer going to go? Kids are going to be out of school and stuff like that. We got war, geopolitics, all this other stuff, right? But cuts are priced in, okay? And if you can afford it, move, right? If you can afford it, move on a property, right? Run the numbers, right? Do not be afraid of a recession. Recession can be opportunity for many that are prepared and a disaster for those that are not. Okay, so which one are you going to be? Are you going to be prepared or not for the incoming wave, which you can ride it into your next opportunity to into an investment property or your first home, or you can miss the wave or get hit by the wave. I don't know. You choose. All right, you choose. I'm gonna choose to surf the wave. That's what we're doing. Okay, that's what we're doing. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. Look, let's keep it moving. I mentioned earlier Warren Buffett, the greatest investor of all time. He has announce who should be his new CEO and when. Okay. He's previously mentioned the CEO before, but now he's mentioning exactly when. And this comes at an interesting time when we have some other things going on, like the chairman of the World Economic Forum also stepping down at the age of 88. Right? We have the stuff with the Pope. Interesting. But look, anyways, I don't want to detract. Warren Buffett, the greatest investor of all time. And we're going to talk about his returns right now and what makes him the best of all time. Okay, look, Warren Buffett's, oh man, oh man. Well, I don't want to say his retirement because he's moving positions, okay? But some may say it's a retirement, okay? But at this point, he has over a 5,500% return. Did you guys hear that? Over a 5,000, let's just say over 5,000% return. Warren Buffett, okay? Versus, let's compare it. There's not even anyone else to compare it close to, but let's compare it to just the market. Okay, we're gonna choose a random index, right? Well, one of the largest ones, one of the big three. We're gonna choose the S&P 500, okay? And that has returned approximately 40,000%. 40,000%. So the S&P in recorded history, 40,000% versus Warren Buffett has recorded over over excuse me for first of all I made a huge mistake when I first mentioned his ROI figures before, and I'm happy I caught this at this point. Like I mentioned, Warren Buffett's return over his career is over 5 million percent. This is 5.5 million percent. Okay, that's not 550. That's not 5,000. Okay, that is 5.5 million percent. And we're going to compare that versus the S&P 500 index. Okay, and the S&P 500, very popular index to follow, has only returned 40,000% when we compare it. And who's second, right? Who would you think would be another great investor? Elon Musk, Donald Trump? Get out of here. That's amateur play. They're ants compared to the Oracle of Omaha, right? Over a 5.5 million percent return. That's bananas. That's wild. And actually, there's an old story where a lot of investors back in the day would say that Warren Buffett was just getting lucky. that they're pretty much just flipping coins, and the same thing what would happen if a monkey was just flipping coins. That's pretty much it. And he showed them, right? He said, you know what? I'm not just gonna talk about it. I'm also gonna be about it. And boom, 2025. Here's this 5.5 million% return versus the S&P's 40,000% return. His long-term strategy outperformed everyone by 140 times, right? 140x. Okay, take Jordan, but if Jordan was 140x runner-up, and look, in this case, let's say LeBron's the runner-up. Okay, let's say LeBron's the runner-up in this case. What if Michael was 140 times LeBron James? Imagine that. How many titles would Michael? All of them. He'd probably still be playing. He'd probably win 2 titles in a year if he could. Change the rules. He'd probably work it up to like have 4 titles a year. And he'd probably retire with like 90 titles, right? If you're 140 times better than LeBron James, that is what Warren Buffett is like to everyone else. Whoever you think your greatest investor is, 140 times them, and that may be Warren Buffett. So look, his announcement that he's stepping down from his position, it's an important announcement. It moves the market. Berkshire Hathaway is a ridiculous stock to own. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's never gonna have a stock split. It's Anyways, let's keep it moving. Look, BRICS banks are buying gold to kill the dollar. What does that even mean, right? What type of BRICS, right? So BRICS is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Now there's some other countries that are being added as well. You can see them as an economic coalition that kind of is opposing the dollar, right? So opposing G7, the G7 nations, opposing NATO in a way, obviously opposing America, the U.S. But look, right now, China and Russia, not China. Whoa, that's kind of weird. China, Russia. So China and Russia, and a few others, like I mentioned, they're rapidly increasing their gold reserves to avoid using U.S. dollars in international trade. That's what they've been doing. Okay, remember that the U.S. was talking about our gold reserves, right? Well, then everyone else was kind of, and during turbulent times, people go to gold. They go to gold and silver and other investments as well. But these precious metals are a safe haven, and we've seen gold go up steadily, right? We don't know what's going on. Turbulent times. We had Trump coming to office. We have tariffs. We have war possibly in the Middle East. Well, not possibly, but we have war for sure. So look, if BRICS, they keep doing what they're doing, they're going to weaken the dollar, and we cannot bet against the U.S. You cannot bet against us. We're a wild card. You don't know what we're going to do. Right? We're going to send the gals and the guys out there, and we're going to do what we got to do to win whatever war we got to win. Right? Whatever type of coup we got to do. I'm not going to mention certain organizations, but, we got to do what we got to do to stay number one, ideally. And right now, BRICS is an opposing force to that. Okay? To the monetary system. So just something to think about when it comes to your investments. You may put your investments into something else, crypto, other stocks, of course, gold, right? So just think about really what you're investing in, and these geopolitical and economic coalitions really do matter. All right, so pay attention to that. If you hear about BRICS, remember I mentioned BRICS. All right, so let's keep it moving. Look, Japan has a strategic play in U.S. trade talks, all right? And we know that Japan's our ally, right? Well, they hold a lot of our treasury bills, okay? I believe 1.1 trillion of treasury, okay? So look, Japan's finance minister hinted at using their 1.1 trillion in U.S. bonds as leverage during tariffs talks. Okay, that's immediately what I thought of, right? With Japan being one of the largest holders of US bonds, I thought, well, they're immediately going to pull that to negotiate, but I didn't realize, well, they're allies and they're smooth, they're cool at first, but now with the pressure that they're getting from Trump and kind of that they mentioned that these U.S. tariffs are extortion, pretty much. Who knows? We don't want to keep pushing away our allies, right? Especially Japan, especially Japan. We have a great U.S. Okay, I'm gonna change that word. We have a good U.S. presence in Japan. Look, if you're a Marine or you're a sailor, okay, you know what I'm saying. But look, we have a presence there, and we don't want to mess it up with trade. It just doesn't make sense, especially with our great allies. Come on, it just doesn't make sense. Look, if you're into crypto, you may know about the FedNow system and CBDCs that are going on. And some people are talking about that they could be a Trojan horse or financial surveillance, right? Think about that. So think about all this digital money going on, right? If we move into a digital money system, how how much surveillance is there going to be on all your transactions, right? So if you don't know what FedNow, the FedNow infrastructure could underpin a U.S. digital dollar. Okay, they've been working on the FedNow system for a while. It's not really out there on the news, on articles. You have to go digging to find out about it. They're not mentioning it because they don't want us to know. They just don't want us. They want the system to be ready, tested, and ready to go by the time they're ready to put it out to us, right? So they want to be quiet about it. But look, it's raising privacy and freedom concerns, right? Digital money, you have these corporations just monitoring all your money all the time, which is what's going on now with banks. Okay, but we get into Fed now, we get into a federal system like this, more connections. It's just a lot more tracking, and I really don't trust them with our data, with our information, right? If they're even at a step closer now where they're tapped in with your banking, they know exactly what to target to you. Aside from your social media and your searches and everything else and where you go, right? They know everything about you, and they know how to tailor and when to tailor it to you to sell you something, whether that's something physical or that sell you an idea or a dream, right? It's some concept, right? So think about that. Think about that. But are we? Do we think we're entering an era of like total financial control? Where you can't even transact cash anymore. Imagine that. You can't give someone $50. Your grandma can't give you that $5 no more, in the little hand, in the little, she has to send it over Fed now, and it's going to get taxed, and there's a transaction fee, and there's no cash allowed, right? No. Just think about that. That could be incoming. Who knows? But how are you going to prepare for that, right? I want you to think about that. I want you to think about that. Okay, look, we have a lot of people always discussing what is the best investment. Is it real estate? Is it stocks? Is it bonds? Is it business? What is it? Right? Because there's a time value factor going on for everyone. Everyone's got a different situation, but maybe you want to make money this way, right? Maybe in property management and doing it this way, or doing flips, or doing this. But as we know, real estate has specific things that are bonuses in real estate, right? You can do some deferrals, there's depreciation, there's 1031 exchanges, right? There's section 121 of a tax exemption, right? There's certain things that you could do with trust, okay? And particular in my community with the VA loan, there's specific incentives, right, that you can use in programs and all these things to really get a leg up. And it's a ROI though, but it's extremely hard to calculate. With stocks, it's a little bit easier to calculate stocks. Now, there's different forms of stocks, there's different types of trading, right? All that stuff, but we have to look at the complete ROI, okay, of the amount of time that we're spending. And also, energy and stuff like that also matters, right? If you're getting a 10% return on stocks and you have to work 8 hours a day and you have to work 8 hours a day in real estate, but in real to get the same percent return, 10%. But on the real estate field, you have to do all the physical work yourself, right? So now you're expending physical energy, a, a lot more physical energy than, let's say, if you were trading stocks to make the same ROI, right? And let's say have the same exact result at the end, right? Not ownership or anything. You sell after X amount of time and you make X amount of money, right? But in this one here, you had physical energy that you were also expending way more, right? So these we have to consider everything in this equation. So let's go ahead and talk about it today. So look, real estate averages around 10.6% as an ROI, okay? That's annual. Now the S&P 500, 10.1%. Now the S&P 500 is just one index, okay? There's the Dow, there's the Nasdaq, and there's many, many more that you could consider, but the S&P 500 is just usually the most known. Okay, we have bonds usually at 5 to 6%, right? Bonds are IOUs, U.S. Treasuries, from the US government. They pay you that money back, right? And we have savings account. Your savings account may be returning you 0.61%. Congratulations, right? Compare that to real estate at 10.6% and the S&P 500 at 10.1%. Now, I believe that most Americans are extremely underinvested and losing compared to inflation, right? Even if the Fed hits the target of 2% inflation, which they're not right now, it's higher than that. It's neither here nor there, but I guess it's whatever. Um, we're extremely underinvested and we have inflation eating our money. So let's say 2-3%. It's just sitting somewhere in a bank account may be earning 0.61%, right? Run that against whatever the inflation is, right? 3%, right? And then now we're at what? 3%, 0.39. So we're underinvested. We need look. I feel like the numbers didn't make sense there, but whatever. You get the point. Okay, let's keep it moving. Well, most Americans are underinvested. You have to out earn. You have to out earn, and you have to beat inflation. Double whammy, and all these fees, all these other things. You have to invest your working income, whether that's a W-2 or a 1099, whatever type of money you got coming in. You know what I mean? I don't care. Invest that money, whether that's real estate, stocks, bonds, business, whatever you got going on, you need to invest that money so it's working for you while you're sleeping. You can keep working your regular W-2 job, your 1099, bringing that money in. Sure, you don't have to get into entrepreneurism or being full-time real estate or whatever it is, right? I work with investors that they just want to put their money in. That's it. They just want to put their money in and get the return, and that's it. They don't want to touch a hammer. They don't want to touch a doorknob. They don't want to talk to a client, and that's okay, right? Now you may get more involved in real estate. Same thing on the stock side, right? You may do simple swing trading, just long-term buy and holds, or you may get into options trading, or you may get into day trading, or you may get into futures or commodities, right? Or this or that, right? There's a lot. The layers get deeper and deeper. No diddy with all of this. Okay, all right. So you have different investment types. That's why when I talk to people about investments, I want to know about you. What is your style? What is it that you like? What you don't like? You know, sometimes I like people. Great, I love doing real estate. Sometimes I don't like people. Great, I'm doing a lot of stocks and trading. Right? You have to really reflect upon yourself and be able to observe yourself. Right? And if not, try to take an online test. Right? Do a DISC test, DISC test, right? Do more personality tests, the in-depth ones, right? I'm not talking about those just fun ones that you do when you're like 12, 13 on the internet. You know, you're trying to find out, blah blah blah. Look, do real professional tests to find out about yourself and apply that, and that'll help you figure out what you can actually get into. Right? Use ChatGPT, talk to people, whatever it is, and figure out what the process is. Right? Stock trading is a lot different than doing real estate at a certain level, right? The most comparable level, I would say the top level in real estate, when more the white collar side, maybe you're finding deals, you're more on the computer, maybe underwriting, running some numbers, doing some large searches, something like that. But you have the in-depth real estate, right? Which you can't really, I mean, you could, in the stock world, you could be on the actual exchange, you could be in the pits. So there's levels to all of this. There's levels to all of this. But what I'm saying is reflect upon yourself to really apply yourself and put yourself in the right garden to grow. Okay, you got to put yourself in the right garden to grow. And S&P, I really do feel like the S&P earned more than the real estate. More than real estate, I feel like the percentage here isn't accounting every single thing for the ROI. But even Buffett has said it. He said that his best investment was real estate, but he would have made way more money putting that money that he put into that house into the stock market. He would have made way more money. But he still said that real estate was one of his best investments. So that says something there, right? Because your stocks can't provide you shelter necessarily unless they're bringing you dividends, right? And you're actively trading, but they can't provide you physical shelter. You can't sleep under your stocks and still own your stocks, right? You have to sell those stocks, or you have to sell them, sell options contract, and hope that it doesn't get triggered, whatever. But a home can be bringing you money in and providing you shelter at the same time. Something to consider. It's something to consider. All right. You could do both of them. I talked to a lot of people about doing partially real estate and stocks at the same time. You have to diversify in that manner. Bonds, businesses, invest in yourself, spread your money around, but you need to get an ROI and do what you want to do. Do what you like doing. If it's real estate, get into real estate. If it's stocks, get into the stocks, learn it and apply yourself. So look, you got to ask yourself, are you investing for a real return, or are you just going to watch all of your money and your savings just melt away as inflation just melting it constantly, right? 2-3%, and who knows if inflation is going to go up higher. So invest your money. All right, let's keep it moving. Oh man, let's keep it moving. Look, one thing I want you to not forget while you're here is make sure to tap that like and subscribe button wherever you're watching. Please subscribe, follow if that's Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn. You're on MySpace right now watching this, probably. Napster. You're on LimeWire watching this. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Look, it's there. I think it's right there. It's a reminder. Okay, look. And for resources, don't forget to book your free consultation right here at themilitaryrealtor.us. Okay, that's really the URL .us. Don't put .com. .us. Book your free consultation. Let's talk about real estate. Let's talk about your military service. Whatever it is, let's talk about it. Okay. All right. Let's keep it moving here. I'm not here to talk your ear off all night, but look. Oh man. See, some of the news that just comes out is just wow. We have NVIDIA producing AI factories that are going to replace today's data centers. And we have them moving to America and really supporting a lot of manufacturing here. So NVIDIA is one of the largest market movers in the last several years. Okay, NVIDIA is making all these semiconductors, concepts. They're pushing it out there. Their leader is great, right? He looks cool, talks a lot, great people person. So, and that's something to consider, right? Leadership is very important to consider when it comes to a company. Who's the CEOs, right? Who's the CFO? Who's on the boards, right? Do they communicate to the people? Do they have good presentation, good interviews? Those are all things to consider, okay? And we have NVIDIA factories popping up, right? NVIDIA factories and data centers, manufacturing plants, right? So if you're in that industry, especially if you're a military veteran, I know there's a lot of people in aviation eye level that they would love to go work on chips, right? I know we got folks from SpaceX, the space cadets, and the Chair Force, Air Force. And probably some of them also work on stuff like this, some bomb techs and all the space whiz stuff, right? Can come get jobs at these factories. Find out where they're going, where they're building at, get a property there, get a job there, and go kill it. Go do well. Go be a QA inspector, make 80K a year or something. But look, are y'all ready for this? Are y'all ready for all these data centers? Are you ready for all this AI to really, sweep and just electrical devices everywhere? I don't have a smartwatch, but I know a lot of people do, and sometimes they have a Whoop or something, a fitness watch too, and who knows what else you got in and around you. All these electrical items. Just if you could take a second, count how many electrical items there are in your house that maybe like connect to the internet. I know there's light bulbs that do that, right? So you can change the lights and stuff like that. It's like there's just so many of these points that someone could access and maybe be malicious. So think about it. Look, we're stepping into a digital world, cyber world. So I need you to be protected when it comes to cybersecurity, and that includes your local Wi-Fi too, your local network, your phones. So that's something to think about. I want y'all to be safe, especially when we're out here investing. We got realtors getting scammed left and right on their phones, emails and stuff like that. People getting scammed out of their mortgages, right? All these things. So please be safe when it comes to cybersecurity. That includes your phones, that includes your laptops, right? Shoot, I mean, nowadays they probably hack you through your car or something, through your Tesla or something. I don't know. But look, we've talked about consumer debt for Americans being high, but we really need to talk about U.S. debt interest hitting 1 trillion per year. That's interest. Okay, so imagine America's got a credit card, and the debt that they got to pay on it is $1 trillion per year. Would you think America's got good debt, like good credit? If America's paying $1 trillion in interest per year, do you think America has good credit? Well, I mean that's why we got downgraded on Moody's for our. That's all I'm saying. I'm not talking. I'm not talking that junk, America. But look, I'm just saying you're a little broke. So I see why you're trying to implement Doge, and you're probably trying to you're trying to get the minerals from Ukraine. You're a little broke, America. Not I wouldn't say the people. It's not the American people, but the government, right? The American government. You're broke. So we're hitting $1 trillion in interest paid per year on our debt, right? Our debt's about, I believe, 36 trillion, anywhere from 33 or 36 trillion. That's with a T. That's not okay. So that's not with an M. Okay, first of all, we need to take that's not in the thousand. We're not saying 36,000. We didn't say 360,000. We didn't say 3.6 million, 360 million. No, we didn't say that. We didn't say 3 billion, 3.6 billion. We didn't say 360 billion. We said 36 trillion. Not even 3.6 trillion. We said 36 trillion. That's wild. America, you got a American government. American government, you got a spending problem. Do not blame it on the American people. Trying to blame it on us that it's our fault that we got inflation and blah blah. No, you guys keep printing money. What are you guys doing over there at the Fed? Just printing money like crazy. COVID was crazy. They're printing money like it was no one's business and just funneling it to defense corporations. Anyways, let's keep it moving here. I'm not here to blow the lid. All right, trigger no one here. Okay, look, no snowflakes, please. No one here that's gonna cry about the truth that's going on in the world when it comes to economics and money and stuff like that. Okay. Oh man, no, my light died. All right, hold on, y'all. Let me fix this real quick. Let me fix this. right, y'all. We had a little technical difficulty here, but we're we should be good now. Sweet baby Jesus. All right, y'all. Oh man. So, what do you think about VA buyers that are losing out to cash and conventional offers? Right? I feel like there's a stigma between realtors against the VA loan, and I've seen it firsthand as a realtor myself. So, why is there a big stigma against the VA loan when it comes to buyers? Right? And it seems like they're getting pushed aside in bidding wars due to misconceptions. And here are the two biggest misconceptions when it comes to VA loan buyers that we see. Okay, and it sucks that these are negative for VA loan buyers, but you have to know this if you're a VA loan buyer that wants to buy a home under the VA loan. Now, you don't have to, right? If you're eligible for the VA loan, you can use it, but you could use a conventional, you could use a FHA, you could use a NACA, you could use a CHAFA loan, or any other type of loan. You don't have to use your VA loan. But look, the stigma is number one when it comes to the appraisals, okay? They don't like that there's an escape clause, number one, for VA loan home buyers, okay? They don't like that. So if it doesn't come in where you want it to come in, right, you can cancel the contract. But number two, relating to appraisals, is the timing of it, right? Depending on the location, it may be difficult to get a VA approved appraisal out there to do their job, right? To get the actual appraisal of the home done. It may take a month, or who knows, right? So there could be a backup there, and some sellers don't like that. They want to, hey, I want to close in 2 weeks, I want to close in 3 weeks. That is not a problem most times, but they don't like that there is a contingency, right, where there's not a necessary limit. So it could take you 3 weeks to just get your appraisal done, right? But you have that ability as a VA loan home buyer. You have that protection, right? So if you're a seller and you don't, and it doesn't matter to you, right? You're not in a remote area. There's not a crazy shortage for some reason of VA loan appraisers. You get your done appraisal. The last one that we did, it was a day. I told the lender, boom, it got ordered. Hey, we got the date the next day. Hey, they're gonna come out in this many days, XYZ. That's it. So if you're in a regular place, but look, if you're in the North Pole, okay, there may be an exception. Okay, but look, we just killed that realtor stigma against VA loan home buyers. Okay, there is no delayed wait times or long closing times, right, when it comes to the appraisals. There is not. So don't discriminate against VA loan home buyers. And that includes sellers too, right? If you're a seller and your realtor tells you, "Oh, I don't suggest selling to VA," I'm not going to tell you to work with another realtor, but look, you may want to give me a call so I could find you a realtor that, number one, is a military veteran or they're currently serving, and number two, knows what they're actually talking about. Okay, because that realtor that says, "Oh, I don't recommend working with VA loan home buyers," they're garbage. And let me know their names too. If you know realtors that say that, let me know who they are. I would love that. Put them in the comments, oust them, whatever it is. If you ever heard a realtor, a lender, or anyone, right, advocate against VA loan home buyers or sellers, oust them. Let us know who they are, because that's just messed up. We should not be doing that against veterans, folks. Veterans and active duty, National Guard, Reserve, all this, right? All those folks, right? All of us that went and signed up to serve should not be coming home and being discriminated against because of a old stigma, right? That some realtors and some sellers all push for. We're not about that. We want fairness, especially when it comes to those that have served this country. All right, so let's keep it moving. Let's keep it moving. Look, those that are still serving, right? Some folks that I serve with too, right? We know about AI coming into the military and how that's really changing private contracts and a lot of the systems and the components that we use. Now, some folks in the service, they've never touched AI in the service or anything like that, right? But I was one of the fortunate ones to, I guess, see some stuff like that, experience some stuff like that years ago. Um, and we know that there's private contracts that are 4 years for a certain amount that's allocated, and this stuff is public information, right? So I'm not saying, hey, use insider information, but you may know about Palantir, you may know about Anduril, right? Or in similar firms that are constantly now arming the Pentagon, right? So if I were to ask you, do you think in the next year, 3 years, and 5 years, there's going to be more or less war, right? Just more or less conflicts, right? If you say yes, there's going to be more, or yes, there's going to be less. Yes, there's going to be more. Yes, there's going to be less. Which one is it, right? So just think about that: 1 to 3 to 5 years, more or less war. If you think there's going to be more, then it would make sense that the defense companies that supply those wars are going to go up in value because they're going to sell more stuff. If you think that there's going to be less war in the next 1, 3, and 5 years, right, then you wouldn't buy these companies, or you would do a call option, right, and swing downwards. But I would recommend, if you think that, you got to go to therapy or something, because war is not going less. No way, no how. No way, no how. I'm telling you that. These folks do not make profits from peace. I'll tell you that. Sadly, very, very sad. But look, you're looking to invest in AI and autonomous defense systems and stuff like that. Take a look at Palantir. Take a look at Anduril. And look up the government contracts for the small businesses. There's tons of tech companies, tons of drone companies. I went to a convention this last, I don't know when, but a few months ago, and it had a bunch of military startups, and a lot of them were in defense, were in tech. They weren't all military related, of course. There were some folks. I met someone that had a rugby whole league, right? So there's a lot of stuff there, but at that conference, the big stuff was the big AI stuff, the big defense stuff, the big tech stuff. All right. So if you're serving, keep your ears open to that. When it comes to investments, the little stuff that you may pick up, right? Talk to who's in supply. See if they know anything about XYZ, about who supply. You may know some of the techs of, like, oh, is that a Raytheon part? Oh, okay, okay. You guys get a lot of Raytheon parts here. Oh, you guys just put in a big order for a lot of Raytheon parts, right? So you may just be an AO, right, aviation ordnanceman, and you may just know these things, but you don't relate that necessarily to investing, right? In the beginning of my career, I was in the aviation field, so I saw a lot of Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, General Dynamics, Rolls Royce, right? So we see all these parts, and just over time, I started thinking, I was like, man, well, if they got a government contract for 5, 10 years, like, that's guaranteed. Government's pretty guaranteed. In the real estate world, that's like being a landlord for Section 8, right? Or in any other government program, right? A lot of times that's automatic cheese coming in. That's just coming in. Checks being sent out, especially during COVID, right? So that's something to think about. Let's keep moving from defense. Oh man, look, I won't beat a dead horse, but I love Bitcoin and Ethereum. If you're in crypto, take a look at those for investments. And I'm not gonna say this other one. I'm not gonna say this other one. But look, don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you're watching. LinkedIn, Twitter, MySpace, Neopets, wherever you're watching from. You could be watching from Mars. Who knows where you're tuning in from? Jetsons TV. I don't know. Bedrock TV. Who knows where you're watching this? Like and subscribe and follow. Please support. Free support, $0.99. Just like and subscribe. Stay up to date every single week. with content and information that protects your investments, whether that's real estate, business, stocks, or finance. You have to protect your investments. So let's keep it moving here. Let's keep it moving. Look, I, I don't want to talk about rates. I was about to. I was about to. Look, mortgage rates could drop below 6% if the Fed cuts, which we're possibly anticipating this summer, right? We got to see what comes out with unemployment, with inflation, and tariffs, right? Just global economy, and we will see. We have to remember, right? We're going into summer, school's out, and then we have August, school's back in. You have a lot of spending going back into school, and then that pushes us right into the holiday season, Thanksgiving, Christmas, tons of holiday spending. So everything is planned with that, right? If we're doing a lot of, if us consumers, we're doing a lot of spending, right? Inflation may start creeping back up even more so than it has. And then we have to consider, well, what's the other lever that increases inflation? Well, that's spending, period, but the other side is corporations and government. So do we think the government and corporations are going to spend less money? No, no. So right now we're ramping up to spend more money because Q1 usually a bad quarter, right? After the holiday period, it's January 2nd. Everyone's hungover, everyone's broke, right? No one's got no money, you know. Oh man, hold up. We got a hot camera probably.